All right, welcome to this session titled Pathway to Law School. We have group of 6 attorneys. They are all part of the Hispanic Bar Association of the Inland Empire. They're going to be sharing their stories with all of us, and each one of them are going to tell us about their path from being an undergraduate, growing up in their area, and then going on to law school and being a practicing attorney. We're really interested to hear those stories. At the end, we're going to be taking questions from you, all of the participants. Please feel free to submit your questions in the chat window. For those CSUSB participants, put your student ID in the chat window, or you can message it privately to the Career Center. We have a peer career educator collecting those questions and collecting those ID numbers. And so without further ado, I am just going to open it up to our panelists and let whoever like to start to begin.
I nominate Mario Alfaro, who is the
I was
president of
waiting
the
for that,
HBA.
Ruben. It's the curse of having a last name that starts with an A too. It doesn't help. So I usually tend to go first anyway. So as Ruben said, my name is Mario Alfaro, and I am the current president of the Hispanic Bar Association of the Inland Empire. I'm also the current president of the Federal Bar Association of the Inland Empire. I am a partner at Stream, Kim, Hicks, Rage, and Alfaro, and I've been practicing law out here in the Inland Empire since 2006. I did my undergrad at Cal State Fullerton, and my law school at USC. So, I don't know. I know that there are some people that their whole lives they've said, hey, look, I want to be a lawyer, that's what I want to do, and they've always known that was their calling. That wasn't me, right? I think in 4th grade I said that I wanted to be a hobo, and when they were picking careers and when somebody said why, I said because it sounds like they have the most fun, they get to hang out, and then somebody informed me that there were very, very few toiletries associated with being a hobo, and so that killed the dream. But I wasn't. I like to say that I'm, more atypical on the bad end than most lawyers. So if anything, I hope that your students can take solace that it's never too late to decide to go to law school, because I was somebody who in high school, I would show up for tests and that was about it. I barely walked. It got to the point where there was serious consideration over whether or not I had earned my diploma. And after high school, I decided not to go to school. I was flipping burgers and busting tables. And I thought that, if I could get to be the head bartender at the restaurant I worked at, that would be the top of the mountain. No aspirations to go to school. I did go to a JC for a little bit because I was going to play soccer, but my knees were really bad and I did not want to have to make grades. So that was it. I just focused completely on becoming a bartender. And at the age of 20, my then girlfriend, now wife, became pregnant, and we were having a son. And so I was going to be a father at 21. And that's when she informed me that maybe being the head bartender was not the career path that I needed to start thinking about. And so it wasn't until I turned 21 that I really took school seriously. I mean, it was about 20 when I started going back to school. And that's when I went to a JC, because I really just didn't know what I wanted to do. I at that point, I didn't even know if I was good at school, right? I knew that I could take tests well, but in any type of academic endeavor, I'd always, I don't want to say failed miserably because I have no one to blame but myself. But I did realize two things. One is showing up gives you an amazing advantage at school. It's amazing how much easier school is when you show up. And two, doing the work also gives you this amazing advantage, and taking notes and all of that. And, you know, a lot of it was because I had moved out at 18, and my parents weren't paying for it. And so I was paying for myself. And I took school seriously at that point. I started to try to do as well as I could. And after I was done at the JC level, I didn't really know what to do then. So my wife was going to Cal State Fullerton. She was going to be a teacher. She'd known she was going to be a teacher her whole life. I had always envied her, knowing what she wanted to do. And so I followed her there. I worked hard at Cal State, and I got my grades up, and ultimately ended up in law school. And, you know, all that to say that it is always better to do it with a plan, but it's never too late. Right. And that's one of the things that, you know, one of the reasons why we formed the Hispanic Bar Association is because it is so much easier to do it when you have a plan, when you have somebody that, you know what the steps are. Like I said, I've paid for my way through school, both undergrad and law school, and I have tremendous student debt. But it was never something that I was going to let stop me, right? It was, it definitely is something that looks daunting on your side of it, and not to belittle that. But once you come out at the other end, your education is something that nobody can take away from you, ever, under any circumstances. And it is, if you're thinking about law school, that's something to consider. You will change as a person by going to law school. Some people say not in the best of ways, but certainly in ways that will help you carry yourself through different situations in life that that will lead you to having greater success. And I think you're going to see that, from the panelists today. You're going to really, we've all kind of gotten here on our own, and we've all gotten here in very different ways. But the reality is that once we're here, we're all on the same playing field, and it brings us together, and we form a group. And we're now wanting to go back to the community to help other people come along, to help other people join us, because the water's nice here. It's good. It's a lot of work, but it's rewarding work. It's the type of work that gives you options. And that's really, if you leave here today with nothing else, remember that, law school will give you more options than almost any other endeavor. And that's one of the reasons to pursue it, because even if you don't want to be a lawyer, it will give you the options to do many things in life. And I think that's it for my time, right, Valentina?
I think so. Once you see my camera turned on, it's like 60 seconds. Thank you, Mario. We got a lot of questions coming in so far, and I hope we're going to be able to have time to answer those. I really appreciate the questions coming in. Mario, that was tremendous. I appreciate you sharing your story with us. And now I'm going to hand it off to the next panelist. Who'd like to go next?
I'll go next. It's okay with everyone? Okay, so I never had a dream of going to law school or becoming a lawyer, because I always thought that I couldn't do it. It was just so daunting to think about law school. But I immigrated to this country at a very young age, and I really didn't know the process. After going through the immigration process, which was extensive, very expensive and time consuming, I recall the first time I received my full employment authorization card, my Social Security card. Within a month, I had enrolled in community college. I wanted to do this. I wanted to get an education. Within a few days of that, I was working as a receptionist at a law office of the immigration attorney who assisted me in the process. which was pretty amazing. And then from that point forward, I wanted to do more. I enrolled in, community college, and then I got my associate's degree in paralegal studies. I became a paralegal, and then, well, if I can do that, why not go and obtain my bachelor's degree, which is what I did next. While working during the day, I was paying for school myself, so I had to do that. And then I was a paralegal for about 10 years when I realized that I'm doing everything that the attorney does except going to court or engage in any settlement discussions. I was single, no children at the time, and it was just more of a why not, right? I was older when I started law school. I was 30, but that is typically older since most of the students were in their early 20s. It helped me in that I had a set goal. I wanted to go to law school. I wanted to get this done. I was still working. Versus, hey, it's Tuesday night, let's go to Tijuana, let's go party, right? So it helped me in that sense. So I was more focused than anyone else, and I had time to do my research in terms of what is it that I need to get done. I'm a checklist type of person, and I didn't have a checklist for law school. What do I need to do first? What is the Lsat, right? So I started just investigating and creating this checklist for myself, and then taking the Lsat, which was horrific for me just because I just didn't, it was difficult. It was a difficult exam. And to give you a heads up, once you get to law school, I don't think the LSAT has much to do with, how you perform as a student in law school. But after that, it was what comes next. First year of law school is very, very difficult because I didn't know any better, right? And I knew that I had this one exam at the end of the semester. My whole grade depended on this one exam. But after you get through your first semester, you kind of realize that, hey, this is doable as long as, Mario mentioned, as long as you work hard and you show up, right? And eventually, I got to the end of law school. It was difficult, but then it was time to think about the bar exam and what I needed to do. And a colleague told me, you have to be selfish during this time. And by that, I mean, you have to put in the time to study for this 3-day exam, now 2 in California, now a 2-day exam, and get it done. So that's what I did. I studied from early December until February when I took the exam. The exam, I was physically sick after I took it because it was just so stressful for me to get through it. And then as soon as I passed that, I was working as a paralegal at a law office, and I was offered an associate position at thereafter. So I was very lucky that I already had that connection. Most people do not. So I would advise for anyone who doesn't have that, start making those connections, right? Start attending events such as this one, to see how you can put yourself in a better position by the time you get your license. I've been licensed for a few years. I'm an associate at Reed & Hellyer. I practice business and real estate litigation, and I also practice immigration law because I had to immigrate to this country, and I wanted to go back and give back to those people who needed the most at this time. It's rewarding. The practice of law really is, but it is also very difficult. It is very difficult because you carry your clients' problems on your shoulders, right? You have to figure out how to provide answers or give answers to your clients. But I think that's true of any job where you have that responsibility. And I see Valentina. I'll be here to answer any other questions.
Thank you, Mary. It was so good to hear your pathway and your story. Thank you for sharing.
So I can go next, Valentina. Hi, everybody. My name is Albert Maldonado, and I'm an associate at Best and Krieger in their Ontario office. And first, let me get the nuts and bolts out of the way. To be a lawyer, you need three things. You need a bachelor's degree. You need a Juris Doctor, so you need to go to law school. Bachelor's degree is usually 4 years, can be longer. Law school's 3 years full-time, can be longer if you go part-time. And then step 3 is you have to take and pass the bar exam. That's what you need. That's the nuts and bolts to be a lawyer. My background is I'm born and raised in Rancho Cucamonga, so I'm native to the Inland Empire. And I did my undergrad at Pitzer College. And that is really where my interest in becoming a lawyer was solidified. When I was in undergrad, I was very much a campus activist. I was at various rallies and protests. At that time, the dining hall workers at Pomona College were trying to unionize. And so I was supporting them and at all their kind of demonstrations and civil disobedience. And I remember my sophomore year after one of these protests, I had a conversation with my dad and kind of debriefed him what happened at the event. And he told me, he says, you know, that's great. You need all of that for social change. You need people to be hollering on the megaphone. You need people to be sitting in. You need people to hold up signs. You need people to be walking the picket line. You need all of that for social change. But the movement also needs a lawyer, either because they're going to be charged with a crime or because they want to sue the school. And either way, they're going to need a lawyer. And all those people hollering on the megaphone and holding up the sign and sitting in and walking up and down the picket line, not one of them can speak in court. The only thing they can do is go and sit down in the gallery and just silently observe and watch what is happening because they can't speak. But you seem like a smart guy. You can do what few others can. You can go to law school, become an attorney. So when the moment arises, when they can't speak for themselves, you can speak for them. And so having that conversation with my father it really was like, wow, okay, that sounds pretty good to me. I think I really want to go to law school now. And so that's when it started. So I graduated from Pitzer. There was a question about, oh, is getting a graduate degree a good idea before law school? That's what I did. I got a master's degree at Harvard Divinity School before I went to law school. I was there for 2 years. And after that, I got my law degree from Northwestern University. And now I practice at Best and Krieger, and I practice municipal law. I represent cities, school districts, all kind of local public agencies. And I do a lot with public transparency laws, conflict of interest laws, First Amendment, contracts. To give you a flavor of the kind of work I do day in and day out, I got two different questions from a library once. Question number one, obviously, if someone walks into the library with weed, we can exclude them from the library. But what if they just really reek of weed? So and you walk in, you could smell weed, but they don't have weed on them. Obviously, they just smoked it and now they're coming to the library. Can we exclude them from the library? And I told them, well, unless you really cannot perform your job and you're like vomiting all over yourself because the reek is so bad, unless you're at that point, you can't exclude that person. That's question number one. Question number two, okay, what about people that are outside the library and they're handing out religious literature? Can we enforce our no loitering signs that are posted outside the library? Well, no. The US Constitution allows under the First Amendment for people to engage in religious, handing out religious literature because they have freedom to exercise their religious beliefs. That's a flavor of what I do day in and day out. Now, let me give you some tips and tricks that I have learned along the way. If you want to get into law school and in a good law school, do well in undergrad, do well in college, get a good GPA. So, if find a major that not only interests you, but that you're good at. Because let's say you really love biology, but you really suck at biology and you have like a 2.0 in biology. Don't pick biology for your major, okay? Pick something else that you're kind of interested in, but you're gonna do way better than a 2.0 because you're just gonna shoot yourself in the foot that way. Focus on improving your writing and research. When I was an undergrad at Pitzer, there was only a few professors that would grade me on my grammar and writing. meaning they would just grade on the substance. They would give very little feedback. They'd give a grade, but they wouldn't really critique the writing itself. And I'm talking about like very nitpicky in critiquing the writing, but that's really what you need to improve as a writer. And that's what you need in law school. And that's definitely what you need as a practicing attorney. So the earlier on that you can improve your research and writing skills, the better. So my tip to you is to actively ask your professors, hey, when you grade my paper, can you please give me feedback on my writing and how to improve in my writing? Ask them that. Cultivate relationships. Letters of recommendation are essential to get into graduate school, to get into law school, absolutely essential. But you have to cultivate relationships. You have to spend time with them. You have to go to office hours to get really quality letters of recommendation. Don't let pride be your crutch. When I was an undergrad, I was always in office hours. I did very well in undergrad. When I was in law school, I did the opposite. I would always speak up in class and seemingly sound smart in class. But then when I would feel lost, I wouldn't go to office hours because I felt like, oh, they're going to find out like I'm not actually smart. And so I really was shooting myself in the foot because, you know, I let my pride keep me from going to office hours and learning. And I probably honestly could have done better in law school had I done that, but I didn't do that. So don't do what I did. Don't let pride be your crutch. And the last thing is about imposter syndrome. You cannot control how you feel. That is to say, when you have feelings like, oh, I'm less than, or I'm less smart, or I'm inferior, or, oh, they notice that I'm speaking with an accent, or any kind of those feelings, you will never, ever be able to rid those feelings from yourself. They will always creep up in your mind. So don't try to take them away because that's just a losing effort. But what you can do is you can choose how to respond when those feelings arise. So go back to when I was in law school. When the feelings arose in me like, oh, I'm lost, but I don't want to go to do the office hours because they're going to find out I'm not smart. The feeling I can't control, but I let that feeling control me in not going to office hours. I should have overridden that feeling and said, you know what, I don't care what they say about me. I'm just going to go. I'm going to go to office hours because I'm paying to learn here and I need to go. That's what I should have done, but I didn't. So you can't control how you feel, but you can control how you respond. I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Albert. I want to say to the panelists, we're getting a substantial number of questions in the Q&A chat window. So if you would like to, feel free to open up those questions in the Q&A window, and you can respond to those in that, using that application, that portal right there, Q&A at the bottom. There's currently 24 questions. Waiting to get answered. So if you'd like to, you can answer those in that Q&A. Who'd like to go next?
I'll go next. Hi, everybody. My name is Alejandro Baraz. I am an attorney out here in the Inland Empire. I have my own law office. I practice criminal and immigration. I'm part of the Hispanic bar with these cool people in the Zoom. I am part of the APALI organization. It's the Asian Pacific American Lawyers of the Inland Empire. I'm also part of the Barristers, the Young Lawyers Association out here in Riverside. I went to UC Irvine undergrad and I went to the University of Colorado for law school. So with me, I've always been a super nerdy kid. I played a lot of sports, but in school, I always did good. And the reason being is my mother and father are both from Mexico. My dad's from Torreon, my mom's from Durango. I'm a little farm over there. And as a kid, I would see my mom for about 2 hours. She'd work in the morning, get home around 2, she'd cook. At 3:30, she'd go to her second job. And these jobs were extremely taxing. My mom, as a kid, I remember seeing my mom go work in a factory, using her hands all the time. As I got older, my mom still works at an old home, at a retirement home, taking care of them. So as a kid at 11, 12, or even as 8 or 9, my job was school. My job was doing really well in school, and I knew doing that made her happy. And it wasn't until I was like a freshman in high school where I learned about college. And I did For me, my mantra has always been, don't give them a reason to not like you. Don't give them a reason to fail you. So every class I took from 7 to 12, even in elementary school, I did like extra credit and I did everything. And that's because as you grow older, especially I grew up in Anaheim, you learn that there's going to be obstacles in front of you that are not in front of other people. Depending on your zip code, you may have connections, you may have referrals. I saw a question asking, how did you get your foot in the door? For me, there were no doors. I was knocking on every door. And I remember when I was in 7th grade, they put me in a Spanish speaking class and I did super well in 6th grade. And I remember being there, an 11-year-old kid in the class, they were teaching addition. And I'm like, dude, I'm way too smart for this. So I go up to my superintendent or whatever, and I told them, hey, I speak English. I'm really good at math. Place me where I'm supposed to be placed. And this is me at 11. My mom and dad are working all the time. And fortunately, I was able to take a test. I went to the honors class and I did super well. And ever since then, I knew if I wanted to get somewhere, I needed to work my butt off because I know the mountain in front of me is high. And the thing is, there's nothing wrong with that. And a lot of you may have no connections. A lot of you may not have referrals. But after the Zoom meeting, you could call me. I'm sure everybody on here is more than happy to answer your questions. But for me, knowing that mountain was high, I liked it. I appreciated it because number one, once I conquered that mountain, I'm going to be happy. And I'm going to know that my experience, my effort got me there. And number two, you know who you're going in the ring with. You know you're going in the ring with this big dude, but you know what you're fighting. So I understood college when I was a freshman. I went to college. I went to UC Irvine. And again, I did really well. And when I was there, I took criminology and I loved how the law and history interacted. I was always someone who loved building. I loved how the little details and things, and I loved how things came about. So with a criminology degree, I went to law school. And after law school, coming from my background, I wanted to help. I wanted to give back to my community because I know personally, I'm like, I connect with them. When they see me, they see their brother, they see their uncle, they see who they see in the mirror. And I said, I'm going to go back to my community and I'm going to help them the best way I could. And with that, I'm practicing criminal law and immigration. And I believe that each and every one of you is authentic and you have certain characteristics that will make you a good attorney. In movies, you see people like slamming, like just being over dramatic. Don't try to be them, be you. Be the person that got you where you are and be true to that. Because your authentic self is great and your authentic self will get you wherever you need to be. Going back to putting your foot in the door, it's really just putting in the effort. You will find somebody who wants to help you. Throughout my path to law school, I met a lot of professors. I met a lot of teachers and just anybody who's willing to help you. There are people there that want to help you out. Going to what Albert said about writing is humongous. My first 2 years of college, I took every essay I wrote to the writing tutor. And that's because my high school was, they didn't teach me how to write very well. So I took every essay I wrote to the writing tutor and I had a little notebook and I wrote down every tip he said. And with those tips, I just kept getting better at writing. And I see Valentina. And that's it. If you guys have any questions, I'm always here. I see on the high, let's see. Oh, what classes you're supposed? Okay, cool. I was about to answer a question, but okay.
We have several questions. There's currently 29 in the Q&A. So if any of the panelists like to answer those in the Q&A window by typing out your answer, please feel free to do so. We still have Ruben and Paula to share their story with us. So I'm just going to hand it off to either one of you.
I'll go next, and Ruben can. My name is Paula Hernandez, and I'm going to try to give my background, I guess, really brief because some of these questions are really good or incorporate my 7 minutes. So I was born in Inland Empire, Loma Linda, and I went to high school here, and then I ended up going to college at La Sierra University. I am one of those people that knew they wanted to be a lawyer for a very long time, and probably because my father was an immigration attorney. So when I was young, I would spend my summers making copies for him. And I think I learned to love the law at a very young age. But there's one thing, wanting to be a lawyer, and then a second thing is getting there. So I took my LSAT. I know there's some questions about advice taking the LSAT. I took my LSAT about a year before graduating. It was between my junior year and my senior year. And I ended up taking it twice because I did okay, but I didn't do great. And ultimately my first score was better than my second score. So one advice that I would say is study hard the first time. They say that usually your first score is going to be the better score anyway. So I would spend a lot of time trying to study. One thing I wasn't able to do that was tough for me, that might be tough for a lot of students, I imagine, is I wish I had taken a prep course, but they were expensive. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to take that. But there's a lot of resources out on the internet now, and a lot of groups that do cheaper courses. So I would recommend trying to find something like that. So when I went to college at La Sierra, I majored in political economy. And my comment about what major you do is, I see a lot of people say, someone said engineer, does it matter? I think it is more what Albert said, it is more important to pick a major that you will do well instead of the actual major. Because when law schools are looking at your application, they're looking at a few things. They're looking at your grades, they're looking at your LSAT score. And then I think the third differentiator is your personal statement. So another recommendation I would give is spend time thinking about your personal statement and really working. Don't just make it generic, because law schools are reading tons of personal statements, and they need something to stand out, something that brings out your personality, your character, your story, and everyone has a story. And so it's just finding the right words to put it on paper. And then from college, I went to Pepperdine Law, so I stayed local. And one of the reasons I chose Pepperdine Law was because I knew I wanted to come back to Southern California. And there is something about being in the area that you're going to work in, because you start to make contacts and build relationships in that area, that if you're a little bit further away, it's tougher. So one thing to consider is maybe where you potentially want to live, where you potentially want to work, and apply to several schools in that area would be another tip I give. And currently now I practice land use and environmental law. And that is nothing, I did not know anything about that when I started. I actually started in their labor and employment department, and I got tossed around a little bit. I've done a little bit of litigation, contract law, and finally I just ended up in this area, and now I absolutely love it. So there's a lot of different areas out there, and I think with TV, we seem to think that there's only litigation. And litigation's awesome, but I would recommend trying to find, yes, Mario, litigation's awesome. Try to meet some attorneys, find out what people do, so that you can get a little bit of taste of different areas of law while you're students, while you're in law school. And like it's been repeated by several people, work hard, because if you can work hard, anything is possible, and everyone can do it at any age. I had the path of, I went straight from college to law school, but surprisingly, I actually thought I was one of the younger students at my law school. Most of my colleagues had taken a few years off, they had work, they were coming back. And so that was nice and interesting to see as well. Valentina, I think I'm done. There's a lot of good questions, so I'll pass it on to Ruben, and then we can start answering.
Okay, that sounds fantastic. For the panelists that'd like to answer any questions in the chat window, make sure you hit all panelists and attendees. Otherwise, you're just answering questions to the other panelists. Or you can answer the questions in the Q&A function at the bottom. We currently have 23 questions, so if you'd like to answer any of those in by typing in your answer while Ruben is speaking, go right ahead. But we have tons of questions in Q&A and also in the chat window. So I'm going to hand it off to Ruben.
Hey, great. Thanks, Valentina. I'll try to finish quickly so we can get to the questions. Piece of trivia, Mario and I went to the same law school, graduated at the same time. I know he looks a little bit older than me, but that's probably because he is. Because I went straight through. I was one of those people who knew I wanted to be a lawyer. Also, I started my family at close to the end of college, been married for a couple years and decided to start having children. So I knew no matter what, had to get through law school and start earning money. So I graduated law school, well, Mario and I both did, in 2006. And I got recruited in law school to go to a big law firm out in LA, which I accepted. And then I spent most of my career there in litigation and labor and employment litigation. I was there for 13, almost 14 years. I was promoted to be a partner, and I was a partner for about 4 years. And then I decided to, I guess the easiest way to describe it in the next 2 minutes is decided to do some missionary work back here at the federal prosecutor's office. So I left my partner position to become an assistant United States attorney. And now I do federal prosecution here in the Inland Empire. In deciding and kind of preparing for law school, I noticed a couple of the questions were, GPAs and test takers and concerns about that. I, like a lot of folks, was not a great test taker, and I knew I wasn't. So I did all I could to get my GPA as high as humanly possible, which I successfully did. And I ended up getting into a great law school. But don't be discouraged, because the reverse could also be true. I asked my brother while we were waiting what his GPA was, and it was actually significantly lower than what my GPA was. But he was a great test taker, so he ended up doing great on his LSAT, even though he didn't have as high GPA as me. He ended up getting into a great law school also. So that was kind of my path up to now. And I know we have a lot of questions, so I'll cut it short right there so we can start answering some questions.
Thank you, Ruben. So I'm going to go to Lauren, who's our peer career educator, and she's been kind of collecting all the questions. And I know some of the questions, some of the panelists already answered during their sharing their stories. So Lauren, do you want to share any questions that our attendees might have that hasn't been touched on by the panelists?
Yeah, so right now I'm looking at the Q&A portion. Somebody asked, how different is the path for an immigration lawyer from a regular lawyer? Is it different at all? I want to become an immigration lawyer, and I want to know the path to take.
I would like to answer that. Immigration lawyers are lawyers too. It's different in that immigration law, you are practicing federal law. So if you take the bar in California, for instance, and you decide to move to Minnesota, you may practice immigration law, right? Because it's federal, like bankruptcy court. What is the path that you take is you start learning as much as you can about that area of law, just like if you were looking into, I don't know, bankruptcy or looking into real property or business or any other area. There's no difference. When you go to law school, you will still have to complete the same requirements. Some law schools do offer an immigration course. I would suggest that you take that course in preparation for, for what the future will bring in your career. But nothing particularly different than any other lawyer.
No, I agree. Something else that may be different in law school, you may be interning at for example, World Relief in Southern California. You may be going to your summers maybe at a nonprofit or anything anything dealing with immigration.
And Marie mentioned about taking a bar in one state and practicing in another state. One thing to know about law schools is the difference between ABA accredited law schools and non-ABA accredited law schools. I encourage you to go to an ABA accredited law school, because if you go to an ABA accredited law school, that means that you can sit for the bar exam in any of the 50 states. It doesn't matter what state your law school was in, as long as it was ABA accredited. The opposite is true if you go to a non-ABA accredited law school. If you go to a non-ABA accredited law school, let's say in New Mexico, the only bar exam that you can take after graduating from that law school is New Mexico's bar. You can eventually get to practice in other states if you pass that bar exam, practice for a number of years, I forget what the number is, and then you can take the bar exam in other states. But at the get-go, you're limited to that state only.
Lauren,
Valentina, I saw a
Yes, sir.
question that I want to jump on. I know Mario will have some insights too, so maybe we could be the two that respond to that one. And it was from an individual who was asking, said he was a little bit non-traditional, he's a little bit older, had a family, and was concerned about the time commitment
Yeah, I saw
for
that.
law school. So I responded to that person. I had, as I pointed out, one child in the middle of law school, but I was already married, as I mentioned, in college. And the time commitment was intense. It was a lot of sacrifice from the family, a lot of sacrifice just from generally what you would expect to do as an adult, to have a little bit of aspect of freedom. But my marriage survived. It got stronger. And by the time we got to, to be practicing in a huge law firm, that's really where, just everything kind of got tested. But it's just, again, a matter more of the strength of the relationship. I wouldn't let the time commitment dissuade you too much, just as long as you know what you're getting into. And my quick 30-second tip to my, I'll just share something personal. I remember telling my wife before we went to the big law firm, I said, just tell me if you feel it's becoming too much, if you feel we're, spreading apart and, we're not going to survive, just let me know. That said, she let it go, I think, a little bit longer than it needed before she told me, because it was about maybe 7th year before she's like, hey, this is getting, maybe you shouldn't have been working in the delivery room on your, opposition to class certification. And, but that was important, because then I took my foot off the gas and realized there's going to be other things to succeed, consistent with the obligations to my family. And as I mentioned, I kept succeeding there at Shepherd, even after my wife told me that I needed to spend more time feeding the things that were important.
No, I agree with Ruben 100%. So I have 5 kids, and all of them but one were born before I graduated. No, the 2 were graduated law school, right? So I had a son before I went to law school. I had 2 right before I ended law school, so they're about a year apart. And then I had my last. And law school is a significant commitment. I really don't know that there's anything else like it out there. Obviously, there's a difference between going to a part-time law school and going full-time. I know that when I was going to school, I wasn't even allowed to work, which was the strangest thing to me, because at that point I had, during my undergrad, I worked like 2 jobs at a time. But the reality is, it really is about being committed and working with, your wife or your partner, because at the end of the day, you're doing it, and it shouldn't be for a selfish reason, right? You're doing it because you're trying to better the lives of your family, and that's kind of what you always keep at the forefront. I kind of like Ruben, had that talk with my wife actually right before law school, because I was between going up to Bolt or going to USC for law school. And the difference was my wife was not going to move with me to San Francisco. And at the time it was, she said, hey, look, this is, you can just come down and visit. We're not going to see you anyway. And, and I saw a road that I did not like going down that path, a series of decisions where, I was starting to choose the law over and over again over family. And so I went to SC, and it's a great school. It's and it's very demanding. But I was, local. The one thing that I did, and I don't know if Ruben did this too, but I made a commitment to myself that, there was when I was with my family, I was going to be with my family. And when I was when I was working, I was going to be working. And by keeping a pretty strict divide, I didn't let a lot of it bleed over. Now, that said, once you're a partner, once you're an associate, there is the partner that calls you Friday night. I mean, I'm like Ruben, I've been working in doctor's offices, soccer fields for my kids, and parent teacher night, right? You grab documents to review while you're waiting for your turn, right? And so, but it can be done. It is about managing time. The one thing I'll say that is important is you have to elevate your family to at least as high a status as your career, right? If you make it secondary, I don't know that you'll make it. Maybe you have a better relationship than I did, but if at any point in time my family hadn't been first, I don't know that we would have made it. But because it was, and because I kind of kept that at the forefront, despite the sleepless nights, there was always time for my kids. And that's something you learn. I'm sure everybody who has kids as practice law will tell you, they get home, they have family time, they put their kids to bed, and then they work, right? I mean, and that's just what you do to divide your day up.
Yeah, and that's important, Mario. And then Valentina, we can go to the next question, is to point out to Mario, I always took a day off. I was raised religiously to observe from Friday night to Saturday night, not doing any work. So as soon as the sun went down Friday, I'd stop working. But then right when Saturday night came, I'd start working again. And as my kids got older, they'd say, Dad, can we, do something on Saturday? And I'd say, well, you want me to work on Saturday? And they'd say, no. So then it was just kind of understood that there was always that time set aside for my family.
Thank you. There is that work-life balance component, no matter what field you go into, but especially so for if you're going to law school. That's a huge, huge responsibility. Lauren, do we have any other questions you want to share with us right now?
Another question is, what major do you guys suggest for undergrad? I want to go to law school, so as of now, I'm a criminal justice major, but I heard more English majors get accepted.
So I'll jump in here because I'm going to give this over to Albert because I really liked his original answer to this, which is you really want to pick the one that you do best in. I'll say this. If you are a hard science major, that's better. Right? If you are a science major, definitely get your degree, because that will help you later on if you ever want to enter any type of intellectual property law, right? But the reality is that whatever you do best at is what you're going to be better off taking. That said, and I don't know how you guys feel about this. I feel that the more, if you're like in an impacted major, a major where there's a lot of people applying to law school with that major, sometimes the competition is a little rougher because you're competing against everybody else that has that major. It's an apples to apples comparison. And the school gets to pick the very best that they like from there based on the numbers. Whereas if you come in and you have a different type of major that isn't as common, they can't really compare across the board and say, hey, this person is as good as this person. And so I think you might get a more individualized analysis.
Something that I know a lot of students are curious about, and they've communicated this again and again, is how do you pay for it? And it really stops students from pursuing and applying law school. So how did you get through that hurdle of the finances of what it costs to go to law school?
I'll jump into this one. I was first generation student going into college, really, and I had no idea how I was going to do this. I had no plan. I did have a mentor who assisted me in the process, and I want to put this out there. There's always someone there who's willing to help you out. Reach out to those people, me included, right? Reach out to those people who can help you out and guide you through the process. But in terms of payment, for me, it was, I need to get student loans. There's like absolutely no way that I can afford this. even working, that I can afford this on my own. So I ended up with student loans for undergrad as well as for law school, but I did pursue scholarships. Don't forget about scholarships. Don't forget about grants. It's going to take some work, but you have to do that, because then once you graduate, you have this massive amount of debt. It is very expensive to go to law school. So you want to minimize that. And also keep it in mind through your law school career, right? That you want to get in debt, but the least amount of debt as possible, because you will have to pay it back. And like I said, it is substantial. Other than loans, grants, and scholarships, I really don't know, unless you're independently wealthy, I really don't know how else you could pay for it.
No, same here.
Yeah.
I got loans, and when I apply to law schools, they offer you like, oh, if you come here, you're gonna get a certain amount of money, and you could use that and tell the other law school and be like, hey, they're gonna offer me this much. Are you willing to match it? And it's really, that was the biggest part with me, was leveraging like, oh, this law school is gonna offer me this much scholarship. Are you willing to match that if I go to your law school? And the money part is extremely scary. It's something that definitely made me think again when I was applying to law school, because it's a crazy amount of money. Growing up where a household, you're not earning like 30K, and then you go into law school and 1 year is like 40K. So it is a crazy amount of money. And for me, in that sense, what got me through law school and what I had to do was be extremely selfish. In the sense, when I graduated college, I wanted to go work because my job was to go help out my family. And that for me was the toughest thing about going to law school, is saying I'm going to take 3 years or plus taking the bar and get my degree.
I'll give you a quick story, Valentina. When I was growing up, we didn't have a lot of money. And there was this one toy that I always wanted and I always did without. To this day, it's still like the one thing that I always wanted that I never had. And I didn't realize it until I was much older, that it was a $20 item, right? And we just couldn't afford it. And when I went to law school, I ended up with over $180,000 in loans, right? So to say that the amount of money is daunting it's not an understatement, right? And I give you that example just to, so you can get a sense that it's not like this feels like a little bit of money when, to me. But when I say this, I say it with as much emphasis as I can place on it. That money will be worth it to you. It will be worth it to you in personal growth. It will be worth it to you in a potential income. It will be worth it to you in you being put in a position in a society where you have instant credibility, right? You are suddenly, elevated, and that's essentially what you're paying for. And that's, and it's earned. Right, that JD is earned, that bar, passage is earned. And so as daunting as it might be, I would say let something else stop you from going to law school, right? Let it be that you don't want to be a lawyer. Let it be that this isn't your dream. Let it be that you found something that's better, but don't let it be the money, because that will you'll end up regretting that.
And if I can add, Valentina, or do you want to go to another question?
No, please share. I also want to make sure that people can find you on Facebook. The Hispanic Bar Association has an account, and also please feel free to put your email address in the chat window as students are looking to connect. But please continue, Albert. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Valentina. Yeah, I want to echo what Mario said. I could tell you honestly, I've heard from many non-minority attorneys that say they talk about law school and the prospect of going to law school, and they kind of like talk down on it. And I've always felt that, because there's like, oh, I could find something better to do in my time than go to law school. And I always felt that statement comes from, you are accustomed to having power. You are accustomed to having access. And I've always felt in conversations with minorities and minority lawyers, we just don't share that sentiment because we come from a place of having no power, of having no access. And so the ability to be an attorney, like Mario said, get that instant credibility. We are taught, law school teaches you to be advocates, to build up your persuasion power. So in any room that you're in, you can argue with whatever is going on, whether it impact your family, your community, or what have you. So I just want to double down on that. As specifically to the money part, I want to tell you a couple of things. In grad school, something that you can do that you cannot do at the college level is you could take out loans up to the full cost of attendance. So if you're an undergraduate student right now, you can only take out loans for tuition, but you can't take out loans for food, for transportation, for housing. But in law school, you can do that. So you don't have to worry about, oh, am I going to have enough cash on hand to like have my meals taken care of? You're not going to have to worry about that because you can take out enough loans to cover all of that. That's number one. Number two, I always tell people, if you're 100% sure you want to do public interest, but it has to be 100%, I always say follow the money. Go to the law school that gave you a full ride, because if you're going to be doing public interest, your salary is going to be maybe $30,000 to $60,000 to start. And so you're not going to have a lot of money to be paying back loans. So go to that school that's going to give you a lot of money already. But I always say, if you're even 1% interested in working for a private law firm, try to go to the highest ranked law firm that you can, because the rankings really matter for even having a chance to get into those kinds of law firms. That's number two. And number three, and this really applies to the first year, second years, especially because you have time to work on your GPA and work on your LSAT. If you are able to get into a top 20, top 25 ranked law school, it will pay off huge dividends in terms of the money part. There are two career paths that you could take. There's many in between, but these are like polar opposites. And under either one, you won't have to worry about money. The first is you start your career like Ruben did. Go to a big law firm today, they start you at $190,000. So even if you come out like Mario, you have $180,000 in debt. If you're starting making $190,000 in year one, you're going to be fine paying back your loans. That's option number one. Option number two is you want to be public interest. Well, if you go into public interest, the federal government has this program that you pay the minimum payment for 120 payments, which is 10 years, and then the balance is forgiven. But here's the kicker. If you go to a top-ranked law school, that law school will pay that minimum payment 120 times, which means you never paid back your law school education. But again, that's only if you go into a really, really highly ranked law school. So strive for that. And if you're in your first or second year in college, you have enough time to get those grades and that LSAT score and those letters of rec. So work on it now.
You all have offered a tremendous amount of insight that no one could have found online just by searching. Only by listening to these stories can our students really find this information and be inspired. Not only that, but to connect with you. I thank you for sharing your email addresses with our attendees. And as we come upon the last final minute or two, I just want to ask if any panelists want to share any final thoughts as we leave. I know we couldn't get to all the questions. There were a handful that were fairly similar, so I think that we were able to address a lot of the questions that our attendees had. But any final thoughts for the group?
One thought that I would throw out there is, and then it'll be quick, Albert, is a lot of people ask, what if you do this? Do you need this to get to law school? Do you need to get this GPA? Do you need to do that? And what I would say that we haven't said expressly is you can go to law school with any GPA and any LSAT score and any personal statement quality, right? What we're talking about is giving yourself the opportunity to go to the best law school, right? And so, you know what, if you've made mistakes and your GPA is just terrible, we'll work on everything else, right? But you will be able to find a law school if you really want to go to law school, right? Don't let that stand in the way of you becoming a lawyer, right? We all want you to work as hard as you can so you can go to the best law school. But if sometimes the die is cast, man. Sometimes it's, you know, things are done and there's nothing you can do, right? It's you're just doing your best going forward. And, you know, don't say, oh, well, I can't go to law school because my grades weren't good enough, or because I didn't get a good enough score on the LSAT. You know, there are many law schools out there, all kinds of different rankings. And I know amazing lawyers from all of them. I know amazing judges that went to, you know, non-ABA accredited schools, right? And it has nothing to do with intelligence. All it has to do with is where you were at in your life when you were applying. And then you get, once you get that degree, it's just as good as any other degree, right? That JD is just as good from #1 ranked law school as it is from, you know, the 1000th ranked law school. And so, you know, put the work in, do it, but don't be dissuaded, or don't use your past as an excuse.
Thanks, Mario. I just wanted to say, I hope this panel for all of you attendees is not just information. I hope it is an invitation to reach out to all of us. I mean, the Hispanic Bar Association of the Inland Empire, one of our biggest drives is to build that pipeline, to increase the number of Latino, Latina, and Latinx lawyers. So, you know, don't hesitate to reach out.
I want to second that. Just we've all been in your shoes, and we've all had a lot of questions, and knowledge is power. So if you can ask us these questions that maybe have very simple answers, you can focus on, you know, doing well in school. And
So with that, I guess we can go ahead and end. Unless anybody had any final words, Alejandro,
You know,
Marie,
this will just be
Ruben?
a quick tip, and it's my brother's tip, to not always listen to an older brother's advice. He's my younger brother. So he took the LSAT, didn't get the score that he wanted. I told him, no, man, just go to law school, you know, just do it. He's like, no, I'll go to Spain for a year and learn Spanish and take it again. And he did that, ignoring my advice. He retook it, and he ended up going to the University of Michigan, which was significantly more, you know, higher ranked than the last school that he got into with his previous LSAT score. So one, I think it emphasizes the importance of the LSAT, but two, that it's your career, right? Like, you got to take control of it and do what you need to do to make yourself a better applicant, even if it means holding off for a year and ignoring other people's advice who are normally right. But in this case, I was not.
Well, it makes me think that we originally should have scheduled this for 90 minutes, because I feel like we could just go on and answer all of these students' questions. So I reiterate, please connect with the Hispanic Bar Association on Facebook, and they've also shared their email addresses on here. We will be scheduling a similar session, hopefully within the next year or so, because obviously there's a strong interest. We had over 90 attendees today, and so that tells me that there is a need for this information. There is an interest for students to pursue this path, and they need the mentorship that you all provide. Thank you all. I'll be following up with your group fairly soon, and we're just so appreciative that you were able to share your expertise and your time and your knowledge with our group. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.